Welcome back to another episode of the Roblox Studio Tutorials. In this video, I'll show you how I made a custom camera cutscene system that you can use in your games today, drag and drop. First off, what we want to do is head into Starter Player Scripts, create a new script, call this script Cutscene Handler, no spaces. In the script, we want to get rid of this hello world and we want to lay out some variables that we will need later on. So let's get those up. All right, so I've implemented all the variables that we will need right now. So we have the players, tween service, replicated storage, and all the player stuff. And you have the cutscenes folder, which we now need to make. So we're going to exit out of the script. We're going to go into workspace. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this folder cutscenes. Oh, that's not how you spell that. There we are. And then we're going to head back into Cutscene Handler. And we're going to do a little bit more logic in it. I just coded up a new function in the script. I will explain all this in a second, but for this all to make sense, we need to head back out of the script and go back into Workspace and go into this Cutscenes folder. So in this Cutscenes folder, we're going to create a new cutscene, which we're going to make a new variable. We're going to call this cutscene test. Oh, we don't need to do that one. We just do test. And in this test folder, we're going to create a part that has all the attributes that we would need for a cutscene. All right, so I've created a new part that will be our cutscene part where the camera will be at. If we go ahead and look into this, I also added a keyframes folder, which will keep track of all the keyframes that we have for this cutscene. And we go into the part, we scroll down, and we see the attributes that I was talking about, like duration, easing style, end delay duration, end frame, field of view, return to default camera, and start delay duration. Now that we have this in place, we need to actually create the functionality of actually putting these attributes to work. So we'll head back into this cutscene handler. All right, so I've created the start cutscene function, and it's a lot to look at, but I want you to stay with me as I explained all of this. So let's start. So first off, we check if a cutscene is currently active. If a cutscene is currently active, then we want to void starting another one. And we want to find the cutscene that we're talking about. In this parameters tab, there's going to be a cutscene ID, which is pretty much the name of the cutscene, which is in this case test. And we check if the cutscene start keyframe index equals 0, that means that we want to start from the player's current camera position. And if it's not 0, start somewhere else. We check if a keyframe exists, and if it does exist, we find the next keyframe, and we go from this keyframe to the next keyframe by tweening and animations and all that sort of stuff. Before we begin all that though, we check if there's any delays that we want to do with this current keyframe. So if we want to have a start delay before it starts, we want to wait some amount of time, we can here. And then we actually here, we do the tweening of it. So we might start at the current keyframe's position, but then tween to the next keyframe position here. Hopefully that made sense. We're pretty much going from one position to another, starting at the position here and then going to another position here. After that, just like we did with the start delay, we check if there's an end delay that we want. After we do the end delay, we go ahead and just nullify the current keyframe and then add a keyframe index +1 so we can move on to the next keyframe. If this is an end frame, then we just end the cutscene. And if we have the return to default camera boolean also active, then we just return the camera's properties back to default and we break out of the loop. And then we cutscene active equals false, which means that we're no longer busy and can now play another cutscene. Now, let's go ahead and create the functionality for said cutscene playing. So first, we want to get out of that script and we want to head into replicated storage. I'm going to create a new folder, call this remotes. And then within this folder, we're going to create a new remote event. We're going to call this remote event play cutscene. And also, we're making a lot of stuff right now. We're going to go into script service. I can't talk. Create a new script. I'm going to call this cutscene controller. And we're going to remove the hello world from this cutscene because we don't need it. Added in all the variables and took the time to code up the actual event. Now that we have this in place, we need to go back into the cutscene handler script. Okay, we're back in cutscene handler, and I've taken the liberty of adding the variables. And if you scroll down here, we have the actual on-client event now working. When the server calls this client event, we run this start cutscene, and the start cutscene function has a couple parameters that we pass in that will be handled in another script. And speaking of being handled in another script, let's make that script now. We're going to exit out of this script. We're doing a lot of back and forth, this and that. All right, so now that we're out of the script, we can head into starter player scripts and then create a new script. We're going to call this play cutscene. If I can spell, there we go. And let's get rid of this hello world again and put in place all the variables that we will need. All the variables are in place now and the functionality is also in place. When the player presses the P key, we do this user.input ended, and we play the default cutscene. And this default cutscene is just referencing the cutscene that we made earlier, the test cutscene. If we exit out of this, we have pretty much everything done. What we want to do now is actually create some more keyframes, get this whole thing actually looking like a cutscene. Let me do that quickly. I took the time to create a whole fleshed out cutscene, and we're going to play it in a second. But before we do that, I want to show you some minor changes I did. So the minor changes I did was just adding all these scripts in a folder. And I also made a new script, which is the cutscene visual tools script here. All right, so now we're in the game. And as you see, there are no sort of indication that there's a cutscene here. So let's go ahead and click play. And there we are. Our cutscene up and running, doing what it does best, working as it should.